Imagine you are a Viking sailor. You are standing on a wooden ship in the middle of the North Atlantic. No GPS, no phone, no modern map, and most importantly, no compass. Behind you, the coast has disappeared. In front of you, there is only water. The sky is gray. The waves all look the same. And every wrong decision could send your ship into the middle of nowhere. So here's the question. How did Vikings navigate without getting completely lost? Did they follow the stars? Did they use birds? Did they have a secret stone? Or were they just guessing and hoping not to die? Keep that question in your mind because the answer is not one simple trick. The Vikings didn't survive the ocean because of magic. They survived because they learned how to read nature like a map. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how a Viking could look at the sun, the sea, the birds, the clouds, the wind, and know where land was hiding. But first, we need to destroy one myth. When we think about navigation, we imagine a compass. But the Viking Age lasted roughly from 793 to 1066 AD. And during most of this period, Vikings were sailing before the magnetic compass became common in European sea travel. So if a Viking captain was sailing from Norway to Iceland, or from Greenland toward North America, he probably wasn't looking at a compass needle. He was looking at the world around him. The sun, the stars, the wind, the waves, the birds, the smell of the air. And now the real question becomes, how do you read an ocean like a map? Because to us, the ocean looks empty. But to a skilled Viking sailor, the ocean was full of clues. The problem is, you had to know how to see them. Most Viking voyages were not blind journeys into nothing. According to the Viking Ship Museum in Roskilde, Denmark, many Viking journeys followed coastlines, islands, rivers, and familiar landmarks. So imagine a Viking sailing along the coast of Norway. He sees a mountain shaped like a broken tooth, then a strange cliff, then a narrow fjord, then an island his father once described to him. He remembers it, not because he wrote it on Google Maps, because this knowledge was passed from sailor to sailor. A mountain could become a sign. A river mouth could become a guide. A certain island could tell you exactly where you were. But here is where everything becomes dangerous. What happens when there is no coast? What happens when the Viking ship leaves land behind? And for days there is only open sea? That is where navigation becomes survival. And the first great guide was the sun. The Vikings knew how the sun moved through the sky. They could use its position to understand direction. At midday in the northern hemisphere, the sun could help them estimate south. But now ask yourself, what if the sky was cloudy? What if the sun disappeared? What if you were in the North Atlantic, where the weather can change in minutes? This is where one of the most interesting Viking tools appears, the sun compass. The Viking Ship Museum explains that Vikings probably used a type of sun compass, a flat surface with a vertical pointer called a gnomon. When the sun hit the pointer, it created a shadow. By following the shadow, a sailor could estimate direction. And in 1948, at Undertok Fjord in Greenland, archaeologists found a carved wooden disc from the Norse world. Some researchers believe it may have been connected to this kind of sun shadow navigation. Now picture the scene. A Viking captain holds a small wooden disc. The sun breaks through the clouds for just a moment. A shadow appears. He turns the disc. And suddenly, the ocean is not just chaos anymore. It has direction. But don't relax too quickly, because the sun compass had one big weakness. It needed the sun. And the North Atlantic does not always give you the sun. So what did Vikings do when the sky turned completely gray? This is where the legend of the Sunstone begins. Some Norse stories mention a sunstone that could help find the hidden sun, even when the sky was cloudy. Modern researchers have suggested that this could have been a crystal, possibly something like calcite, able to detect polarized light. It sounds almost magical, a stone that reveals the invisible sun. But we need to be careful. The Viking Ship Museum explains that no confirmed Viking sunstone has been found in an archaeological Viking context. So did Vikings really use sunstones? Maybe. Can we prove it with certainty? Not yet, and that makes the story even better. Because Viking navigation sits between science, memory, and mystery. But even without a sunstone, they had another guide, a guide that could fly. Birds. One famous story comes from the Icelandic Book of Settlements, called Landnámabók. It tells of a Norse explorer named Floki Vilgerdarson, often called Hrafna Floki, meaning raven Floki. According to the story, around the late 800s, Floki sailed toward Iceland and brought ravens with him. Why? Because birds can reveal land. Imagine a ship alone on the ocean. The crew is tired, the food is limited. Nobody knows exactly where they are. Then the captain releases a raven. If the bird circles and comes back, maybe there is no land nearby. But if the bird flies away and does not return, maybe it has found land beyond the horizon. So the Vikings could follow the bird. But here's the terrifying part. What if the bird was wrong? What if it flew toward nothing? What if the crew trusted a raven and sailed deeper into death? That is what made Viking navigation so dangerous. It was skill, but it was also risk. And birds were not the only signs. The sea itself could speak. Experienced sailors could notice things that normal people would ignore. The direction of the waves, the color of the water, the smell of land, the sound of birds, the shape of clouds, the movement of whales, the presence of floating wood. To us, these details might seem small, but to a Viking captain, they could mean the difference between finding land and disappearing forever. If birds suddenly appeared, land might be close. If the clouds formed in a certain way over the horizon, they might be sitting above an island. If the water became shallower, the coast might not be far. And if there was fresh water flowing into the sea, that could mean a river was nearby. This is not magic. This is extreme observation. The Vikings were not just sailing across water. They were reading 1,000 tiny signals at once. But now comes the biggest question. Could this really take them across the Atlantic? Not just along the coast, not just from one island to another. Could this system actually bring Vikings all the way to North America? The answer is yes, and we have proof. At Lonso Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, archaeologists discovered the only confirmed Norse site in North America outside Greenland. In 2021, a study published in the journal Nature showed that Norse people were active there in the year 1021 AD. The researchers used tree ring evidence linked to a known solar radiation event from 993 AD. Think about that. In 1021, Vikings were in North America. That means they crossed the North Atlantic world from Scandinavia to Iceland to Greenland, and then all the way to Newfoundland. No GPS, no engine, no modern compass, just ships, memory, weather, courage, and terrifying skill. But here is the hidden detail most people forget. They probably didn't sail from Norway directly to Canada in one blind journey. They used stepping stones. Norway to the North Atlantic islands, then Iceland, then Greenland, then further west. Every island became a memory point. Every successful voyage made the map in their minds bigger. But even with stepping stones, one mistake could kill everyone. So how did they stay on course? One method may have been latitude sailing. Instead of knowing their exact location like we do today, they may have tried to stay on the same north-south line. If the sun appeared higher or lower at midday than expected, they could know they were drifting too far north or too far south. This was not modern precision. This was survival precision. Good enough to keep you alive, bad enough to keep you scared. And near land, Vikings could also measure water depth. For thousands of years, sailors used a weight on a rope or a pole in shallow water to check how deep the sea was. Why does that matter? Because depth can warn you before you see land. If the water becomes shallower, something is changing. Maybe a coast, maybe a sandbank, maybe danger. A Viking crew could not wait until rocks were visible. By then, it might already be too late. So they watched, they listened, they measured. They felt the ocean changing before land appeared, and that is what made their navigation so impressive. They didn't have one perfect tool. They had a whole system. The coast when they could see it, the sun when the sky was clear, the stars at night, birds when land was close, clouds above hidden islands, waves, currents, smells, and water depth. Maybe a sun compass, maybe even stories of sunstones. But above all, they had experience. And experience was everything, because a young sailor might see only water, but an old Viking captain could see signs everywhere. A bird flying in one direction, a wave changing shape, a cloud sitting still on the horizon, a strange smell in the wind, a different color in the sea, and suddenly, the empty ocean was not empty anymore. It became a map. So how did Vikings navigate without a compass? They didn't just look for direction. They listened to the world. They used nature as their instrument, and every voyage was a test. If they read the signs correctly, they found land. If they read them wrong, they vanished. That is the real story of Viking navigation. Not magic, not blind luck, but a terrifying skill where the entire world became a clue.